This session, we are going to continue where we left off last time, and we'll be using the same set of notes. I'm going to give maybe I'll take a couple of minutes at most to just do a quick overview, just to summarize what we talked about last time. But we don't have a lot of time and so if you missed the last session, I hope you'll have a chance to go onto the website where the videos are online. And of course you can download the handouts from there. So if you recall, we talked about how the Visuddhimagga divides the path of meditation into two distinct paths, tranquility and insight. We talked about that a fair amount. And we discussed how the Visuddhimagga goes in a lot of detail in preparing to develop concentration, selecting an appropriate meditation subject. There's these 40 meditation subjects offered. There are 3 stages of concentration called preparatory, access, and fixed concentration. And we also talked about the different signs of concentration called nimittas. And then we switched and let go of the Visuddhimagga, set that aside for now, and we focused on the Pali Suttas and looked at jhana. And we focused on the first jhana, and we went through the jhana definition. And if you recall, in about half the places in the suttas, just the bare definition is given, and in about maybe roughly the other half of places, the sutta is accompanied by a simile, and the definition is accompanied by a simile, and that's true for all of the jhanas. And so we looked at that in detail. And in particular, there were 5 factors among the many, many other factors that are present in part of jhana. 5 of them are put together in this list called the 5 jhana factors. And those were vitakka, vichara. Vitakka and vichara are the first 2, which we've translated as thought and examination. But there are other understandings of what the meaning is, one in particular being a particular mental function of connecting and sustaining your attention on the meditation object. But it can also have the sense of thoughts or mental reflection or examination. So there's a range of ways it's understood and practiced. And in addition to those first 2, then the 3rd and 4th jhana factors, piti and sukha. The piti, sukha, piti is translated as bliss or rapture. The sukha is happiness or pleasure. Pleasure connotes more of a embodied experience, happiness more mental. And then the 5th jhana factor, ekaggata, translated as one-pointedness, unification of mind, singleness of mind. And so those factors are present in all of the jhanas. So now today we'll pick up with the 2nd jhana on page 10 of your notes. And let me begin just by reading the definition, and then we'll come back in a bit and do the simile, but for now just the definition of the 2nd jhana. With the stilling of thought and examination, he enters and abides in the 2nd jhana, which is characterized by rapture and pleasure born of concentration and accompanied by inner composure and singleness of mind without thought and examination. So first of all, you can see that if you recall the 1st jhana, moving from the 1st to the 2nd jhana doesn't entail gaining more qualities or factors, but it's a dropping away, it's a simplifying of the mind actually. It's a letting go, and so 2 of the jhana factors have been let go of here. The very first, it starts with the stilling of thought and examination. That's the vitakka vichara. And then you enter the second jhana, which still has the piti and the sukha, the rapture and pleasure. So if you think of vitakka and vichara meaning connecting and sustaining, that activity of connecting and sustaining your attention on the meditation object, that's dropped away because it's not needed anymore. It just is connected and sustained. So we don't need the mental function of doing that. If you think of it as some other kind of mental process, thoughts, evaluation, reflection, that too has dropped away. So we're in more of a wordless experience. And then it says born of concentration. The first jhana, in the definition of the first jhana, it said born of seclusion. And it meant both inner and outer seclusion. In order for our minds to settle enough to enter jhana, we need to have some external seclusion. Typically means either being in a specialized environment, such as being on a meditation retreat, or in daily life, it means setting aside time for formal meditations. We step out of the normal busyness of our daily lives. And inner seclusion meant setting aside or letting go of the hindrances. They don't have to be completely, once and for all eradicated, but letting them go enough so that the mind can settle. So that's the seclusion. Well, once we're in the first jhana, we already have that seclusion. The function of the seclusion has been accomplished. So we don't need the second jhana to be born of seclusion. It's born of the concentration of the first jhana that we'd already attained. And it's accompanied by inner composure and singleness of mind. So singleness of mind is just being highlighted here, emphasized. Ekaggata, that jhana factor, is a factor of all the jhanas, so it was there in the first jhana. It's actually probably the most important, or among the most important qualities of jhana. Inner composure, the word in Pali, sampasadana. Let me give you some other translations. So I translated it inner composure. It can also be translated as tranquility, self-confidence, internal assurance, and serene purity. This idea of inner composure, it's similar to a self-confidence or an internal assurance. Basically, we're talking about a stability here. We're not easily buffeted or knocked off our center here. There's really a place of a stability there. So any question about any of that? Okay. Okay, so let's just continue then. On the middle of page 10, let me read then the simile. So we've entered the second jhana. It's characterized by rapture and pleasure born of concentration. It's accompanied by inner composure and singleness of mind. He makes the rapture and pleasure born of concentration drench, steep, fill, and pervade this body, so that there is no part of his whole body unpervaded by the rapture and pleasure born of concentration. Just as though there were a lake whose waters welled up from below and it had no inflow from east, west, north, or south. So the water's only coming up from a deep place from below, and would not be replenished from time to time by showers of rain. Then the cool fount of water welling up in the lake would make the cool water drench, steep, fill, and pervade the lake, so that there would be no part of the whole lake unpervaded by cool water. So too a bhikkhu makes the rapture and pleasure born of concentration drench, steep, fill, and pervade this body, so that there is no part of his whole body unpervaded by the rapture and pleasure born of concentration. These similes are so beautiful, and I really take them to be kind of like poetry. It's just it's just setting a mood or a tone. It's giving us a feeling of something. I say that because it begins with he makes. He makes the the rapture and pleasure born of concentration pervade your whole body. And it's true, it does, that is the language there. But in practice, this is an important point. In practice, this is more a state of being. It's not so much a state of doing. And so that rapture and pleasure are pervaded in the body. It's not so much a making. However, we mentioned last time around when we talked about the first jhana, even though the mind's still and unmoving, and there's a one-pointedness, or we say a unification of mind, there's another part of the mind that can still incline a little. And it's subtle, but it's unmistakable. Now here it's not in words, you're not thinking about it, but there's just a sense of inclining and directing the mind. So there can be, if you want to say makes, that word can feel a little, I know it's kind of a little heavy-handed sound compared to what's actually happening. It's a real subtle touch when you're in jhana. But, and this goes back to a point that's, I think we mentioned this maybe a few sessions ago. In practice, we look to see what happens as the concentration's deepening, and all the experiences that accompany samadhi are deepening, whether it's stillness, calm, expansiveness, could be a pleasant or blissful feeling. You know, some people see lights or hear some sounds. I think most don't, but some do. Or it can feel like energy's moving in your body, or oftentimes it's kind of the piti doesn't have a feeling of energy moving, it's just there. And it's important also to note that the suttas don't define what they mean by piti. It's not very specific. We'll see in a bit that the Visuddhimagga is very explicit about what the experience of piti is, but that's not true in the suttas. And so it's highly individual. Probably, I mean, I'm guessing that at the time of the Buddha and the time that the suttas were being composed, they knew what they meant by piti. But we should know that you should each know that it's highly individual. For some people, quite strong and dramatic. And for others, it's very smoothed out. So it's not just one way. And we don't want to chase after what we think, the experience we think someone else, you know, someone will raise their hand here. It's happened a bunch, and they'll talk about quite dramatic experiences of piti. But you're going to see in the later jhanas, those are going to drop away anyway. So we don't want to be chasing after those. It's what's important is what's happening for you. Before we get into jhana, the practice, we've already discussed this it's not getting on the videos here because we're not recording the meditation practice instructions. But one of the things we talked about is as the samadhi gets stronger and these accompanying experiences get stronger, for some people on their own, they become very embodied, and we let go of the breath. The breath's done its job now, and our meditation object, that's kind of a clumsy way to talk about it, but anyway, the meditation object is the piti suffused in the body, right? For other people, it goes in a different direction in which we're becoming disconnected from the body, and our attention's going just into the mental experience of the piti. So if you're having an experience of blissful light, you want to, it feels like you're going into the light and you're leaving behind awareness of the body. Whereas that's opposite of the light coming into your body. So if it suffuses on its own in the body, there's no sense of makes. There's no doing, it's just done. If it's going out to become disembodied, then we can consciously, this is one of the things we talk about in the meditation, in the practice interviews and in the instructions. It's easy to guide people to bring it back. And then there is a sense of making and doing and consciously suffusing. So this he makes, it's individual. You may not have to make anything, or there may be a sense of you doing. The second thing I want to point out from the simile is that if you remember, the simile for the first jhana was the bathman's apprentice. And it's someone making soap. That person took the bath powder and the water, and it was very energetic. They're working the soap, putting in a lot of energy and effort to suffuse through the body. That was the image. Here, it doesn't have that, that energetic feel at all. It's very smoothed out. This image of this water, which is very cool, there's a stillness, a calm, a peace, peacefulness. And it's just welling up from below. It's not rushing in on these gushing streams from the sides. It's not raining. It's just welling up from deep within. And so there is a movement happens. Something is welling. It's still moving. But it's more calm. It's more deep. It's more cooled out. So that's the feeling, yeah? Okay. Anything else? Any question? Yeah, you guys are quiet today. Okay, good. Yeah, all right. All right, let's turn to page 11 then. And I've just put in here, I'm not going to say much about this, but just I want to mention for completeness, at the top of page 11, there's an alternate scheme for the first two jhanas. And I've listed 4 places in the suttas. So here we have the first jhana has Vitakka Vichara. The second jhana, those are gone. In this scheme, there are actually 3. There's with Vitakka Vichara. The next one has the Vitakka has dropped away, but the Vichara is still there. In other words, the connecting's dropped away, but the sustaining, or the thoughts dropped away, but the evaluation is still there. And then so it's got only one of those jhana factors, and then the third is the standard second jhana. Both of those factors have dropped away. This system doesn't appear anywhere else in the suttas. It's just briefly mentioned. There's no explanatory detail. It could have been something that just somehow got popped in there later, in later years or centuries. And also the term samadhi. These are 3 different kinds of samadhi, 3 stages of samadhi. The term jhana is not used. So it's actually, this formula might not necessarily be even referring to an alternate jhana system. Just wanted to mention that, FYI. Okay. So let's pick up with the third jhana here. Middle of page 11 on the notes. With the fading away of rapture, he abides in equanimity, mindful and clearly aware. Feeling pleasure with the body, he enters and abides in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, equanimous and mindful, he abides in pleasure. So the piti, the rapture, is dropped away. You still have the pleasure, you still have the sukha. One of the things that can happen is the piti, which perhaps we're drawn towards, when we're first practicing, maybe we think, oh, that's really great, that's what I want. I keep hearing about this bliss, I want some of that. And then, as things settle, what we were drawn towards later feels too much, it's too intense, it's too coarse. And the mind really wants to settle, and that's what's happening here. It's a dropping away of that jhana factor, piti. We're still left with the sukha. It's very explicit, feeling pleasure with the body. So I've translated, sometimes I translate sukha as happiness when I mean more mental. Here, translate as pleasure because it's a pleasant feeling in the body. And it's emphasizing, so the fading away of rapture, you abide in equanimity, mindful and clearly aware. And then again, you're feeling this pleasure. You enter and abide in the third jhana, and then emphasizing, it's repeating for emphasis, equanimous and mindful, he abides in pleasure. Right? So this idea is things settle out, because this is what's really is of importance in jhana. What's the point of jhana, right? Certainly these meditative states, and I think we've talked about this, it has its own value, because it can be refreshing and restful. It can be healing, and it can nourish us and nurture us. So these states actually do have value for their own sake. But in the Dharma context, they're really in service of the liberation of our hearts and minds. It's not about the meditative state itself. These are conditioned states, they come and go. But what's important is that the mind becomes so clear, and that's what's emphasized here. First of all, we're in equanimity. Equanimity does not mean numbness or you're not having any feeling. Equanimity means we're not buffeted or jerked around by what's happening. So if something, now you're not getting really unpleasant in jhana, but in general, equanimity means, just say in daily life consciousness, as it's a balanced state of mind. As we go through the ups and downs, the pleasant and the unpleasant experiences of life, that's the idea. We're at peace, we're balanced. And so this sense of being balanced, equanimous, comes to the forefront, along with mindfulness and it says here, mindfulness and clearly aware. That idea of mindful and clearly aware is really important. We want to know when we're really resting in the stream, in the current of non-clinging, and to be able to perceive on ever subtler levels when there is some clinging or suffering. And so that's really what the power of jhana is to see on subtler levels. Things have quieted out a lot, so there may not be much going on. Remember, thoughts have dropped away, even that was back in the first jhana. Then the PT's settled out, so there's still pleasure, but it's smoother. There may not be much going on, but you don't need much. You can perceive subtleties in what's going on in the mind, the body, any experience. So that's emphasized here in the third jhana. And listen to the simile. I think it really highlights this. He makes, so there's that makes again, but listen to the simile. He makes the pleasure divested of rapture, drench, steep, fill, and pervade this body, so that there is no part of his whole body unpervaded by the pleasure divested of rapture. In other words, without the piti. Just as in a pond of blue or red or white lotuses, some lotuses that are born and grow in the water thrive immersed in the water without rising up from it, rising out of it. And cool water drenches, steeps, fills, and pervades them to their tips and their roots, so that there is no part of all those lotuses unpervaded by cool water. So too a bhikkhu makes the pleasure divested of rapture drench, steep, fill, and pervade this body, so that there is no part of his whole body unpervaded by the rapture divested of pleasure. Yeah. So you get the feeling here, these are these lotuses that they're born, they live, and they die, just always immersed in water. They don't have to do anything. It's a state of being. And so this gets back to why I think of this maybe as poetry in this language he makes. There's really no making here. And it really truly is a state of being. And you notice with the rapture, the fading away of rapture, you abide in equanimity. In the second jhana, you entered and abided in the second jhana, and so on for the first jhana. Here, it's just an abiding. There's not much doing. And even in the second jhana, in the simile, it was subtler than the first jhana, but there was still some welling up of water. In this image, there's no welling. It's just a state of being. It just is. You just are immersed. And so that pleasure of the sukha just is suffused in the body. Yeah. The mind just is, you just are mindful and clear and equanimous. Okay. All right, and so we'll end this session. We'll just, let's look at the fourth jhana. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain and the previous disappearance of joy and grief, he enters and abides in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure and purity of mindfulness and equanimity. So with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, so that's a body, right? Pleasure, pain in the body, no more pleasure or pain in the body. And the previous disappearance, joy and grief are pleasant and unpleasant mental experiences. So both in the body and the mind, you enter in a state, and it says here, which has neither pain nor pleasure. So you're not, and purity of mindfulness and equanimity. So you've got this equanimity, but you're not even having to be equanimous of pleasure and pain. That's just all gone. And I think it gets clearer when we look at the simile. He sits pervading, there's an active verb, pervading, but it's really just is pervaded. But he sits pervading this body with a pure, bright mind, so that there is no part of his whole body unpervaded by the pure, bright mind, just as though a man were sitting covered from head to foot with a white cloth, so that there would be no part of his whole body not covered by the white cloth. So too a bhikkhu sits pervading this body with a pure, bright mind, so that there is no part of his whole body unpervaded by the pure, bright mind. So that is what comes to prominence here, right? It's just the clarity of mind itself. The experience of the body, this isn't the text speaking, but this is just me, it's still connected with a sense of the body, but the body may feel just a very subtle experience of the body. Maybe it's dissolved away, your experience of it is dissolved away into light, or just light vibration. And it's that clarity of mind itself which is prominent and the stillness is prominent in your awareness. Yeah. So I think, let me just look here, I think that's basically what we want to do for this session. Let me just look here for a moment. Yeah. And of the jhana factors, now 4 have dropped away for the fourth jhana. The thought and examination, piti and sukha, the rapture and pleasure, thought and examination, the vitakka vichara, the piti and sukha, the rapture and pleasure. And so we're just left with the unification of mind. So we have this clear, bright mind. The unification of mind, or the one-pointedness, is the unmoving aspect. And so the experience is it's happening on its own. There's nothing you're doing to sustain the state. It just is self-sustaining. It's unbroken. So obviously, your mind could never wander off. And the impulse to even wander off would not arise. And then the clarity of your mind is heightened tremendously. So that's the basic idea. Yeah. All right, when we come back, well, 2 things. First of all, when we come back, we'll have a practice period, and when we're meditating, we want to let go of a lot of these words. This is not meant to be an academic course where you have to memorize all of this. You either some of you have my book, or you have the notes here, so you have the reference if you want to go back. And it is good to familiarize yourself with this. But then you want to let it go, because it's the use of studying this is only to help our practice, inform our practice. And so I hope we can just let all this go, and we just go back to the simple practice, the mindfulness of breathing, whatever other practice you may be doing. And then we stay attuned to see how the samadhi unfolds, to help us, to know, how we either direct the attention to be more embodied or not. And again, you don't have to figure that out. you know, I or whomever you're working with in your practice will, you know, help you know when do you stay with the breath, when do you suffuse the samadhi in the body. Don't stir your mind up thinking about it. You just sit with the simple practice of mindfulness of breathing, okay?